Good morning and welcome to the October 28th, 2020 meeting of the Delta Conservancy. My name is Karen Mitchoff. I'm a supervisor in Contra Costa County and I chair the Conservancy this year. Mr. Ingram, would you give us the meeting peculiars?
Sure. Good morning, Campbell Ingram, Executive Officer of Delta Conservancy. Just a couple quick Zoom reminders. We're starting to get good at this, but it's always good to remember. Board members, staff, and presenters all have the ability to unmute themselves, but it's important, please, to stay on mute if you're not talking. Just helps with the meeting. If you are a member of the public and you'd like to be recognized to make a comment at the appropriate time, you can go into the participants section on the Zoom platform and you can raise your hand. You'll see a little icon down there to raise your hand. James will recognize you and unmute your mic and you can make a comment. If you're actually calling in on a cell phone, you'll have to use the #2 sign to be able to raise your hand. Similarly, James will recognize you and unmute you, but you may need to remember that you might also need to unmute yourself or your own line to talk. You also have the ability to send in comments if that's the way that you would prefer or if that's the way you need to, and you can send them to contact@deltaconservancy.ca.gov. And if you're having any problems technically, we request that you email our CNRA IT group, which would be at cnrait@resources.ca.gov. So that's it. I appreciate your patience. And given the nature of the teleconference, we won't go through a full introduction of everyone, but I will ask Jessica to go ahead and do a roll call of the voting members, acknowledge the liaison advisors and any ex officio members who are on the line.
Excellent. Jessica Adel, Fiscal and Board Analyst for the Conservancy. Roll call, Supervisor Mitchoff.
Here.
Vice Chair Leo Winternitz.
Here.
Supervisor Natoli. No. Supervisor Miller.
Here.
Supervisor Thompson. Supervisor Pavenza. Gail Miller. Brian Cash.
Here.
Board Member Matsumoto.
Here.
Board Member Rootstaller. Board Member Sandoval.
Present.
Hey, Jessica, before you go on, I see that Skip Thompson is with us, but you were muted. Skip, are you there? Still muted. Well, as we get around to any other the roll call, oh, there he is.
Campbell
Yes.
and Ingram, sorry, Campbell, Jessica. There are 2 hands raised as attendees that have dialed in. I don't know if those would be members that were trying to answer. So I'm going to allow the caller on 130 to talk. If you're a board member, can you please unmute yourself?
This is Supervisor Thompson. Can you hear me?
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Sorry about the confusion.
And then call in user at 374.
Supervisor Natoli.
Oh,
Good.
excellent.
Good morning.
Good morning. I wasn't done yet.
Yeah. I see also that Larry Roostdollar has joined us on the link.
Larry, Board Member Rootstaller, are you in the meeting? Can you
He's
unmute?
having some, I'm working with him on email. He's having some issues with the phone, so
Okay, good.
get him
Okay,
on.
excellent. I see for liaison advisors, I can see that Moira McGinnisby and Jim Waters are here. Are there other liaison advisors present? Can you unmute yourself? Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Jessica. So back to you, Karen. Public comment.
Great. This is the opportunity for anyone who wishes to make a public comment on any item that is not on today's agenda. There will be opportunity when we get to an agenda item for public comment. But is there anyone, Jessica, who has indicated they wish to make a public comment?
Elisa? So far, no.
All right, we will then move on to the consent calendar, which includes our July 22nd, 2020 board minutes, consideration of amendment to the term of the nutrient eradication project, and consideration of amendment to the term of the Stone Lakes Restoration Project grant. Do I have any public comment on any of these consent calendar items? Hearing none, do I have a motion, please? Leo, I'm sure you'd like to make a motion, wouldn't you?
As soon as I unmute myself, I'm happy.
You're unmuted. There you go. And Dolly, how about you for a second?
I was trying to do the same thing.
Thank you. Moved by Leo, seconded by Dolly. Any further conversation or discussion? May we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Mitchoff,
Yes.
Vice Chair Witternitz,
Yes.
Supervisor Natoli,
Aye.
aye. Supervisor Miller,
Yes.
Supervisor Thompson,
Yes.
Supervisor Provenza is absent. Gail Miller is absent. Brian Cash,
Aye.
Sandy Matsumoto,
Yes.
Larry, you managed to make it on? Rustaller? Larry Rustaller?
I think we're still having some technical issues.
Okay. Dolly Sandoval?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm saying your full names. It's just, I'm reading and that's how it's coming out. How should we handle, Nicole, Larry not being able to get on?
If you have a quorum, then, you can proceed with the meeting. So then I would say it's the chair's discretion how to proceed with or without him.
Okay.
Let's just keep the vote open because I'm sure at some point he'll come on. And Larry, if you can hear us, maybe you can text to staff your vote at this point. And let's just proceed with the rest of the roll call.
Excellent. Our roll call is complete. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So far, 8 yeses, 2 absent. Motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you. Yeah, let's do that. We'll act as if Larry's there and he can confirm that later. All right, we're moving on to item 5, which is Executive Officers Report. Go ahead, Campbell.
Thank you. Good morning. And that should be the hard part of the meeting. So that was our one action item. The rest are very interesting and compelling updates. So, so hopefully the hard part's behind us. First thing I want to note is that you all should have received an email yesterday that included all of the 2021 board meetings. So you can get those on your calendar. It also included, if you remember, we try to ask you just to at least mark your calendar for the off Wednesdays every other month in case we need to have an extra board meeting. We haven't had to do that in a long time, but it's helpful just to have those identified. And then it also includes a list of the program and policy subcommittee meetings for next year as well. So if you haven't gotten that, let us know, and we'll make sure that we got it. Karen, you haven't gotten it yet?
I didn't get it. Did any of the other board members get it? Okay, Leo's shaking his head yes. Dolly, did you get it? Yeah, okay. Sandy got it. Okay, I must be the odd duck out. We'll just...
Anyway, and then we can always resend it. It's not a big issue, but we wanted to get it out early so people can get those.
Staff may have sent it to my public inbox, and so my staff may have it. I'll check with them if I don't do anything until I let you know. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So next up, I want to welcome Sarah Lesmeister. I don't see her up on screen. Sarah, you want to just say a quick hi so everybody can see you and know who you are?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. So good morning, everyone. This is my first board meeting with the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta Conservancy. I am coming here as the Environmental Program Manager over the Ecological and Community Program. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here. My experience has been mostly with DWR, but I'm very excited to be working for the Conservancy and be more engaged here. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, Sarah's been working in the Delta for about 13 years. She's also been working with the Interagency Ecological Program, as well as leading the DWR's monitoring program in the Delta. So she has a great background in all things Delta and its science, and she's been here since October 12th, and she's done a great job. She's hit the job ground running and started to acclimate, and it's great to have her. Please welcome Sarah. Okay, so I'm going to move through the program updates, and please feel free to ask any questions as I go through. Regarding COVID-19, we all continue to work from home 100% of the time. That's our expectation for the foreseeable future. Staff has really done a great job. We've only had minor disruptions in productivity, and we're actually doing quite well, continue to do quite well. We're actually conducting our first virtual site visits. As you know, we do site visits before we actually fund projects, but even as projects are moving forward, we like to get out and see sites at least once a year. So staff developed some protocols on how to do that and have conducted some of the first site visits virtually, which is an interesting process, but it seems to work quite well. And also wanted to mention that Larry Hughes, who was on our staff, he had volunteered to be our contact tracer, and he has been assigned for 6 months to Lake County. And we actually had a birthday celebration on Monday this week and got to chat with Larry a little bit and hear a little bit about his progress and how that's going. So moving on to Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, shorthand for JEDI. So as everybody knows, most organizations are thinking through these issues and how they can be better JEDI conscious. And the Conservancy is doing the same. We've set up a JEDI subcommittee, and I want to thank Dylan Moore and Shelley Temple King, who have volunteered to be the co-chairs of that group. And we've met a couple times. We've had some great conversations. The entire staff has been through the implicit bias training that was put on by the Resources Agency, and it was really a fantastic training, very enlightening. I know there were close to 800 people on the training throughout Resources Agency, and almost everyone I've spoken to said that it was really enlightening and they learned quite a bit. We got to do a bit of a decompressed discussion after that, and we've had one brown bag so far, and we're going to do another one, I believe, next month. So a great opportunity for the Conservancy to really try to recognize the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and try to be the best we can be both internally as well as externally in the Delta. So moving on to the ecosystem restoration.
This is Larry. Hello. This is Larry.
You're with us.
I've been with you. I just couldn't figure out how to talk to you. So I voted yes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. I got that vote.
Okay, moving on to ecosystem restoration. The first thing I want to mention is just the nutria eradication. We have Valerie Cook.
Campbell, I'm sorry. You talked about staff is still working remotely. Is Sacramento County, what tier are you in? The reason I'm asking is, could some come back in, or I know it's more convenient to work at home, but I'm just curious from operational, if that's under consideration at this time.
Yeah, Karen, we're in the red tier. We were hoping to get the hour.
You're cutting in and out, Don, but I heard that you're in the red tier. So
yeah.
Only essential. Okay, thank you.
Okay, for nutria eradication, Valerie Cook is with us today, and under agenda item 8, she's going to give us a full overview of that program. Moving on to delta subsidence and carbon emissions, just want to share that it's kind of an exciting time. We've had a real uptick in interest in pilot projects moving forward. Been working with some private rice growers as well as the Nature Conservancy. As we mentioned before, we're actually helping those two groups do their carbon estimations and then connect with the carbon market. I've been talking for a long time that DWR's carbon credits are about to be certified through a third-party validation process. That has actually happened, and that's exciting because that's the first time wetland carbon has been certified anywhere globally, right here in our Delta. So that's pretty exciting. The other exciting news is I've been talking a long time about the need to get our voluntary market protocol adopted into the compliance program. And the California Air Resources Board has a offset compliance task force that has met and is considering existing protocols that CARB should adopt into the compliance program. And they just completed their first preliminary report, and that included a recommendation that they look at the protocol that has been developed for the Delta and consider it and for potential adoption into the compliance program. So that'll take a while, but that does almost triple the value of the carbon and makes the incentive really compelling for agricultural and public interests in the Delta. Two more quick things on that item. Go ahead, Leo.
No, go ahead, finish up, and then I have a question on that.
Sure. Also, just want to recognize that two new drivers. We've talked about the water resilience portfolio that was finalized recently, I believe in September, and that has a directive in it that state agencies should stop practices that cause subsidence on state-owned lands. And then, of course, the governor's executive order N82-20, which came out just a week before last or last week, time flies, that really directs the state to conserve 30% of biodiversity and California and conservation in California by 2030. And that specifically recognized the need to do wetland restoration. So both of those are just really nice, strong pushes and drivers to support the work that we're trying to do in the Delta.
So Campbell, so I think it is really exciting that CARB is recognizing the Delta carbon protocols. What is the time frame for that ballpark figure? Are we talking 1 year, 2 years?
Yeah, it's a very rigorous process, and it's intended to be, and it needs to be, to ensure the integrity of the carbon markets. So what we've heard is that it's anywhere from 18 to 24 months. So if CARB were to decide to do the work tomorrow, we'd be looking at minimum 18 months from now. So, you know, it's unfortunate that it takes that long, but it is important that it's a very rigorous process.
Okay.
Last thing I would add is that there was a nice article that came out in California Ag Alert. I was interviewed as along with Dawit Zaleka from the Nature Conservancy, and it's really talking all about the interest and increasing interest in growing rice in the Delta as a way to stop subsidence, create a commodity that actually is economically viable, but then also use the carbon market to get an additional revenue stream on top of the rice value. So that was really nice. I can send you the link, but it is paywall protected, so it's hard to access. Okay, moving on to community and economic development. The first thing is the Delta marketing. We've been talking to you for a very long time about the need and desire to get these welcome to the Delta signs placed out in the Delta. And thanks to the hard work and persistence of Elisa Harrop on our staff, she is going before the Caltrans California Traffic Control Device Committee on November 5th, next week. And that is where we hope to get final approval for the sign design, which we can then place on sorry, I'm an old CalFed veteran, Caltrans right away, and get those signs placed finally. So it's exciting. I think we have every expectation that we've done everything that needs to be done, and it should be approved. So thanks again to Elisa. So you'll notice that we have a new section in the Executive Officer's Report, Delta Science, and I just want to recognize Rachel Wigginton, our lead or Delta senior scientist in the Delta. This is largely just a nice initial overview of all the work that Rachel has been doing to keep the Delta Conservancy connected to all the different efforts that are going on relative, regarding science in the Delta. So the first paragraph talks about interaction with the Delta Science Program and the Independent Science Board on their development of the Science Action, revise or update of the Science Action Agenda, and forwarding the Science Enterprise. The second paragraph talks a little bit about the Adaptive Management Forum, which is coming up, and we're part of that planning process, and that's an opportunity for all the science interest in everyone in the Delta to really focus on adaptive management and how we do it effectively in the Delta. And then the last paragraph talks about the Delta Invasive Species Coordination Team, which we help to coordinate, which is just a great opportunity for everyone who's dealing with invasive species to come together and try to build off each experience. Interestingly, the last meeting had a panel that was discussing early detection and rapid response to new invasive species. And you might be surprised to learn that, with everything that's going on in that realm and all the agencies participating, we don't actually have a plan for how do we monitor and quickly identify and respond to new invasive species. So that group is trying to kind of circle the wagons on that issue and see what can be done. And there will be a white paper coming out in the future on that. So I'm going to move into board directives. Any questions on those items so far? Okay, so quickly running through board directives. The first was there was a request that the Conservancy consider providing teleworking opportunities geared toward reducing our carbon footprint and transitioning back into the office. So as I mentioned, we are not anticipating transitioning back to the office anytime soon. We've been our marching orders that until there's a vaccine, we will likely be in our current position of working from home. But we absolutely are exploring that. We're expecting guidance from the state on new teleworking procedures that are evolving as a result of the new world that we're in. And so we'll be looking for those. We'll be working with staff. And it seems though we have some time to work through this, but I think our intention is to be very deliberate in determining how we move forward. Second, there was a request that our Proposition 68 grant program staff report include a map that shows the geographic locations, as well as which of the projects that are being considered that would serve a severely disadvantaged community or a disadvantaged community. You'll see in the Prop 68 update that there is a map that meets this request. You'll also notice that it's a bit of a plain map, and that's a result of the challenge of being compliant with the web accessibility requirements that we all are working with now. So it is a map that actually shows where things are. It's just not it's not bright and pretty with colors and beautifully designed. So the board requested an update on the Proposition 1 project that is at the River Gardens, and it's a restoration planning project. The issue there is that there is some overlap between a planning project that DWR is looking at, as well as the one that we have funded. We've had some challenges getting in touch with the people from DWR and bringing them to the table, but as of last week, we did get in touch with the right folks, and we have scheduled a meeting where we can sit down and review both those projects in their entirety and look for ways that they can move together forward. Board members discussed and requested virtual site visits. So happy to report that we don't have any of those for today, but we have reached out to all of our Prop 1 projects that are in construction or complete and requested that they produce a little 3-minute video. And we've given them some guidance on the type of questions that we'd like them to answer, as well as the angles and how they might do that for us. And so our hope is that by the January meeting, we will be able to air at least 1 or 2 of those in light of the fact that, this year we didn't actually get to do our in-person site visit. So hopefully that'll be something that'll be ready. And lastly, Vice Chair Winowitz requested that we just keep the board updated on the carbon activities, which provided a bit of an update. But as you can hear, there's lots moving. So if, as it warrants it in the future, we may agendize that item and give a little more thorough overview, but we'll continue. Okay, so that concludes the program part of the executive officer's report. If there's no questions, we'll turn it over to Jessica to do the budget and expenditures report. Okay, take it away, Jessica.
I am here. We are going to go ahead and look at agenda item 5.2, the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta Conservancy Budget and Expenditure Report. The report is from July 1st to August 31st. Typically, we would do a quarterly report, but our meeting's a little earlier, so we have 2 months of expenditures to report. So no, we're not spending less. This is just a shorter amount of time to report. But you will notice just a couple things. I always just like to point out a couple things. On row 7, total personnel services. And row 17, facilities operations. Both of those in the right-hand row, column F, the percent of budget expended is 15%, and that is typical of 2 months of expenditures. The only other thing I wanted to point out is we did do a draft budget in July. This budget that you're looking at now is about 8% less due to mandated reductions in budget from the governor's office. Did anyone have any questions?
Yes. Did that mean staff had to take an 8% cut?
It was a little bit more. We did take a cut, but we have been given more vacations. So there'll be more stay-at-home vacations, spending less, but more time with family.
Thank you for being so positive, everyone.
You know, we have work, so
Yeah.
it's got to be positive in this environment.
So there is no correspondence. So if there's no further questions, that concludes the executive officer's report.
Does anyone have any questions on the budget? Looks like we're well under where we should be for that first month. I'm not seeing any hands raised, so okay, we will move on to item. Is there any public comment on the executive officer's report? Assuming none, we will move on to number 6, which is the Proposition 1 program update, and Aaron will give us that report. There you are. Hi, Aaron. You're on mute still. There you go.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes. So the Proposition 1 program update. I'll start off with a sort of brief overview of where the project is a little bit, give you some highlights there. And then as usual, we will go through the cycles in reverse chronological order, cycle 4, then cycle 3, and I'll provide some highlights of some of the projects I think are most worthy of your note. But as we do go through that process, if there is a project that I do not specifically mention that you are curious with, anyone is curious about and has questions about, by all means interrupt me. And if I discuss a project but you want to go into it deeper, again, by all means interrupt me and we can talk about anything you like. So starting off overall, the program is moving along. We are continuing to execute grants from cycle 4. The grants that have been executed are all progressing. Many of them, as you'll see, are accomplishing the milestones that were set out for them during their grant agreements. You will see a scattering throughout this report of impacts, of complications, of delays that are due to COVID and/or wildfires. None of these complications or delays have resulted in anything representing a critical terminal threat to any of our projects, but they are things that our grantees are having to deal with and sort of adapt to and figure out ways around. Some creative problem solving going on. With that, so I'll take us through cycle 4. Nothing specifically dramatic to note with cycle 4. 5 grants of the 10 in this cycle have been executed and are underway. The other 5 are being negotiated. But the ones that are underway are moving forward. They're picking up steam. Moving back to cycle 3, the first thing I'd like to bring your attention to is at the top of page 4. This is the Bay Point Habitat Restoration Project. 1701 is the number. And construction is complete on this project. Pretty excited to have this an implementation project of ours along the edge of the bay in an area that does not have a lot of public access to the bay. Now has a nice chunk of restored habitat that is going to grow and improve over the coming years. So they have accomplished all of their construction tasks. Continuing back, I think that's the only real comment that I have for cycle 3, other than to note that 2 of the grants in this cycle, they're sort of at the top and the middle of page 6, are the 2 grants that you, at the consent calendar, just approved amendments for. And one of those, the Nutria Eradication Project, is one of these COVID impact related adjustments that we have had to make. Part of the need for the extension was just a sort of unavoidable delays due to social distancing requirements and meeting cancellations, and also then impacted by reduced work because of air quality because of the smoke over the summer. Moving back to cycle 2, all 4 of these grants are moving along very nicely. And one that I would bring special attention to is in the middle of page 7, the restoration for priority wetlands for endangered species at the Cosumnes River Preserve. This is, again, an implementation project. They've completed construction. They've completed all of their major task objectives, a couple of little monitoring activities left. And this is the first implementation project of a Prop 1 grant that is actually going to be closing in the near future. So it will be closed between now and when our next meeting is. So it's pretty exciting to have an implementation project actually completely close out. And the project looked great. We actually did, Campbell mentioned that we were starting our virtual site visits, and this was the very first one we did just a week or 2 ago, and looks amazing. The invasive plants that they were set to control are virtually non-existent at the moment. They'll come back a little bit, but definitely down at a controllable level. And the lake bed that was the major construction portion of the project has been completely resculpted and deepened to the point where it now holds water 12 months out of the year, which is pretty exciting. Continuing on back to cycle 1, first thing I'd like to bring your attention to, another exciting development, is at the top of page 8, the YOLO Bypass Wildlife Area Habitat and Drainage Improvement Project has completed construction. This has been a project that has a long history. It was one of our first, it's a cycle 1 grant. It was one of the first grants that we had executed. And they have had to deal with many complications and cost changes and additional permitting requirements that they've had to overcome. A lot of hurdles that this project has had to jump over, but they've jumped over all of them. And as of just a couple of weeks ago, they have completed construction on all of their construction and sort of movement and resculpting tasks. So they've redone drainage ditches and installed pumps and moved power poles. Pretty exciting. So YOLO Bypass will be able to, hopefully the managers of the YOLO Bypass will be able to more finely tune and control water on and off the property. And the last item to bring your attention to is directly below that one, again, sort of in the middle of page 8, the Fish Friendly Farming Certification Program for the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta Conservancy. Last board meeting, I reported that this project had finished their task and was about to close, and now I'm reporting that they have indeed closed. So they are completely finished with their project. And with them being finished with their project, that brings me to the end of my report. So any questions about anything Prop 1 related?
I'm not seeing anyone raise their hands.
James, we do have a hand raised.
Okay, is it a public comment?
No, it's Leo.
Oh, Leo, I lost you there. Go ahead, Leo.
Thank you. Hi, Aaron. Thank you for the report. I have a couple of questions. Back to cycle 4
Yes.
on American Rivers. So there are actually 2 projects on cycle 4. But if you go to page 2 and page 3, so we have American Rivers, the Lower San Joaquin Riparian Corridor project. Grant status pending, new information none, and the same kind of information for their project on page 3, Marsh Creek Channel Restoration. Grants agreement status pending, new information none. I'm just a little concerned. They've had some staff have left American Rivers lately over the last several months. These projects are 2018, 2019 fiscal year. Is there any movement on these projects? What is going on? What is happening with them?
Yeah, so there's definitely movement on these projects. And yes, American Rivers has certainly had some notable staff turnover in recent months. That being said, the one person who has been involved in these programs, who has announced that she's leaving, the grants that she was involved with have already been reassigned to other American Rivers staff, and they're people that we know and have worked with. So they're certainly very well versed with the Proposition 1 sort of environment. And I have every confidence that they'll be picking up these projects and moving them forward. They have definitely had progress on the negotiation and execution on all of these. Where both of those are actually standing right now is not dealing with any of the sort of California-based American Rivers program staff, but needing to get information from American Rivers headquarters in Washington, D.C. on fiscal tracking kind of stuff. In particular, nuances with their indirect rates and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. No, I appreciate that. If you're comfortable that progress is being made, then that's great. The other project that has similar type definition is the Banta Carbone Irrigation District. Do you have any update on that?
Yes, I do. I'm happy to say. So the grant agreement has been fully drafted and is working its way through the review process. And I don't foresee any significant complications. This was a pretty straightforward grant agreement to negotiate, to put together, and I'm anticipating a fairly smooth review.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Projects that are completed, it'd be nice, I don't know if it's possible, but like, it'd be nice to get some pictures or some video of what the end result looks like.
Definitely, yeah. We should put something together to give some sort of follow-up feedback.
Maybe a little explanation on, you know, if there are before and after pictures, that'd be great, or an explanation of how it's now functioning as compared to how the landscape was previously functioning. So we get an idea of how these dollars are being spent, what the improvements are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
It's great. Up to this point, as I think I mentioned, we're about to have our first implementation project close. So we haven't had a lot of, you know, on the ground, really sink your teeth into materials for that kind of thing, just planning projects.
Right.
But even with the planning projects, you know, providing updates on what those plans are developing into, stuff like that, definitely.
And then, as we mentioned earlier too, we have reached out to try to get some sort of virtual tours of those projects that are in construction or nearing completion. So hopefully we can share some of those as well moving forward. All right, I think that's it for Prop 1 then, Aaron, unless there's other questions.
I have a question.
Dolly, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm wondering, with these virtual tours and with kind of pre and post pictures, can we put these on our website also as Prop 1 accomplishments? Just to like, it's great that we'll know in a meeting every other month what's happening, but I think it would be really good to let the greater world know that Prop 1 was a good thing for us and that we were able to restore acres, planning projects, et cetera, in the Delta, and really kind of promote the heck out of that.
I completely, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I completely agree that it would be a fantastic resource to be able to broadcast. We are somewhat bound by accessibility issues, and figuring out how to accomplish that with things like pictures and videos is still a bit of a puzzle.
Yep, I can understand that, but I don't want to lose sight of that because we're not just benefiting those of us on the screen right now, right? Those of us attending the meeting. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Dolly, just so you know too, that essentially everywhere I go, I'm always touting that, you know, we've put 29 projects out on the landscape affecting about 8,000 acres. And we've done it with local support, with the unanimous support of the board members. And that's a really powerful thing. But you know, you're right, it would be nice to be able to do that more visually and put that up on the web and we'll continue to strive for ways to do that that are accessible as well.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members? All right, do we have
Sandy had a
Oh,
comment.
a question. Hey, Aaron, thanks a lot for this. Can you remind me, I feel like there was a next step with the fish-friendly farming certification. Is this project, is there a next phase or is it complete, like, are we done?
Yeah, so this grant is done. But yes, I'm not intimately involved in this particular portion, but perhaps others can provide updates. We are involved in developing a contract with the same organization, the Fish Friendly Farming Organization, to continue the work, to get farmers enrolled in the certification process, and to continue that outreach and continue sort of spreading the impacts of the materials that they created.
Rachel, would you like to give a quick input on that?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for queuing that up, Aaron. So we do have another contract with CLSI to perform more work on the Fish Friendly Farming Initiative in a different part of the watershed. And we recently fully executed that contract. There had been some slowdowns on that due to COVID-19 and other just technical issues, but we have our contract in place with them, and we've started to get some of the receivables from that work. So new versions of the advertisements to send out to try to get people enrolled in this fish-friendly farming program. And the goal of this particular project is to get 10,000 more acres of farmland enrolled in the program.
And Sandy, just to be clear, this is not a Prop 1 grant. This is a contract EPA funding that came through the State Water Board. So that's why there's a little bit of confusion about where it resides. But I do think that in the future we should probably add an update about this project in the executive officer's report, so that as a place that we can report out what the status is.
That's great. And I mean, I think that's a really interesting model too, right? I mean, of using Delta Conservancy funds for the planning phase and then trying to find funding from other sources for implementation, so that we should really be taking credit for that as well, because I think that was really innovative move by the staff, very creative way of kind of extending the impact. So yeah, and just the through line is helpful, to just a reminder. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions from board members? I'm not seeing any hands raised. Is there any public comment on this item?
There's currently no hands raised.
Thank you. Then we will move on to item 8, which is the nutrient eradication program. And I'm sorry.
7.
Oh, thank you. I was already thinking ahead. Thank you. Item 7, Proposition 68 program update from Robin Kroc.
Good morning. So I'm going to dive into the staff report. You should actually have 2 pages, the staff report and the map that, as Campbell mentioned earlier, was a result of a directive from the board at the last board meeting. And I will scroll down to that one. So staff is currently working with applicants to develop 8 full proposals. As a reminder, our program begins with submission of a concept proposal. So these 8 proposals have been through the concept proposal assessment and been moved to the full proposal stage. There are 4 specific items I'd like to focus on in this update. The first item is the map, again, in response to the directive received at the last board meeting. If you take a look at that, the map, you'll see, as Campbell said, we did have to work within the requirements of web accessibility, and Rachel Wigington and Dylan Moore and our staff did a great job of creating this map within those bounds, so making it web accessible as well. As you can see, it's the outline of the legal boundary of the Delta as well as Sassoon Marsh. And then the yellow dots represent each of the proposed Prop 68 projects that we have received that are viable projects. The numbers are the project ID numbers, which you can cross-reference back to the table in the report. So those top 3 dots are in West Sacramento. 6802, just below that, is Clarksburg. If you go down to the middle, you'll see also the note at the bottom of the map, 6805 and 6811 appear as one dot. They are literally right next to each other. So on the map, they appear as one dot, but those are 2 different projects. 6806, and those are in Isleton. 6806 is also listed as Isleton. It's at the intersection of 12 and 160. 6804 is Pittsburgh, and 6809 is the Pacific Flyway Center in Solano County. So as you can see, the only county that we don't have a project from yet is San Joaquin County. We do have one in the pipeline that I have 95% confidence that we will be receiving their concept proposal. We've heard from them a lot, so we are definitely expecting to receive that. Having said that, I am going to use this opportunity to just touch on something that I'll touch on more in a little bit. We are undersubscribed in this program, and so we do have a appeal to the board to let your constituents know about the program and to reach out to us with any questions they might have about any potential projects they have. So I'm going to go back up to the table now, and the next directive that we had, the second directive we had from the board at the last meeting was to show severely disadvantaged communities and disadvantaged communities. And because of certain requirements, including the web accessibility restrictions, we decided to not show those on the map with those projects, but rather to add a column to the table. So you'll see that in the table, the column second from the right, there's a new table that is disadvantaged communities, or DACs, DACs, or severely disadvantaged communities, SDACs, SDACs. Again, at the top of that table, there is an asterisk that goes to a note at the bottom of the table, which is actually on the second page, which does note that what's included in this column is if the project serves a DAC or an SDAC as confirmed by Conservancy staff. And that's important to note because there's so much data out there about how to define a DAC or an SDAC. And so most of our concept proposals have come in saying that they do serve an SDAC. We are limited by the very clear definitions and guidance that's in the bond, or the definition of the bond and the guidance that we've received from agency about how we define serving an SDAC. And so the only thing that's included in this table is projects that, again, have been confirmed by Conservancy staff to serve a DAC or SDAC. So as of right now, only one project is actually confirmed to serve an SDAC, and that is the Pittsburgh project in Contra Costa County, 6804. Another item that I wanted to be sure to note and provide an update on is that you'll notice that the total amount requested is actually lower than it was in the last report. The reason for this is that 2 of our projects, 6803 Southport Levee in West Sacramento and 6804, the Pittsburgh project, were originally proposed as implementation projects. Because the projects didn't meet the 65% design plan threshold that is a requirement of most programs, we discussed with the applicants that we wouldn't be able to fund them as implementation projects. The applicants decided to submit the projects as planning grant proposals instead, so we're excited to still be able to work with those projects. While both projects are large enough that I've estimated, since we haven't actually seen the planning budgets yet, that they'll come in at around $250,000. That the two projects combined are make the total requested amount about over almost $2 million less than they requested as implementation projects. So obviously that makes the total amount requested significantly less. We are discussing an outreach plan internally. As I said, the program is undersubscribed, and we will keep you updated on that as we move forward with that. The last thing I'd like to note is the addition of the inactive proposals table. The City of West Sacramento submitted 3 concept proposals, and they decided to the Prop 68 program, and they decided for the moment to focus on just 2 of those proposals. But the 3rd proposal hasn't been closed, so we didn't want to just remove it from the table. It is still an eligible project, and it's still something that they may decide in the future to submit as a full proposal once they have completed the process of these other 2 proposals. So for now, we have added this inactive proposals table and keeping it on there. The 8 proposals that we're working on are in various stages of development, and we'll bring them to the board on their timelines. We anticipate bringing at least 2 to the board at the March meeting. And that is the end of my update. I am happy to answer any questions, Chairman.
Looks like Deborah has her hand raised.
Yeah, Robin, could you just clarify whether or not some of the projects that are not currently showing as serving a DAC or an SDAC could actually end up being designated as serving those? Is it that you've determined that they do not serve at this time, or is that potentially that is still being worked out and could show as serving a DAC or SDAC?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. For now, we have determined we will most likely not be able to move from our first determination that they do not serve an SDAC. There is one of them that we still have a little bit more to look into. One of the issues that comes up is that there are different ways of showing whether they serve an SDAC, and sometimes there is a need for additional information in order to actually have evidence of that. There is one project that may be able to provide that evidence, but most of them will not be able to show that they serve an SDAC.
You're on mute, Karen.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Sandy had her hand up, and then whoever's 916 and then ending in 74 wanted to speak. So go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, that's me, Karen. Yeah.
Okay. Sandy, go ahead, and then Dawn.
Thanks, Robin. One question, you mentioned that it's undersubscribed. Are there, and these projects tend to look like public facility type of projects, are there other types of projects that you envisioned, being eligible for these funds that aren't coming in the door? Or is this kind of the good representation of what you anticipated?
Well, the projects that we've received so far are they're a mix of public facility, and 3 of them fall into the historic and cultural preservation priority area. So we have had clearly several of those, and one of them is more environmental education. So I would say that there may be a little bit more of a lean towards public facility, but it is somewhat of a mix. And my guess, well, I can't really guess that. I would say based on what we've received so far, I would expect to continue to receive a mix of applications and different kinds of projects. Does that answer your question?
Are there any other types of projects that you would expect to see but maybe aren't seeing? I'm just wondering if as we think about outreach, is this the scope of the types of projects you expected, or are we not getting a type of project that could be funded?
This is basically the scope of the type of projects. There is one additional environmental education project that we expected to get in and possibly still will. But for the most part, this is the scope of the types of projects.
All right, Don, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Yeah, Robin, thanks for your report. I didn't, in my copy here, I didn't get a map, so I just wanted to ask the location. The first one, the P6811, where is that located at? The Delta Educational Complex?
6811 is the Asian American Heritage Park in Isleton. And 6805 is the Bing Kong Tong building that's right next to that.
Yeah, we put quite a bit of money into that. So the question I have too is that I wasn't able to locate it here, but I know that in Freeport there was a concept paper, and I had reached out to our Department of Transportation about local sponsorship and so forth. What's the status of that, and is that one of those that would not qualify for a planning grant, or I just didn't know where that sat.
So that, first of all, that's not on the map because at the moment it is not considered a viable project because it does not have an eligible applicant. We have, I know that you've talked to both the applicant and the county. We did have a conversation a while ago with Dan Schumann, and I know that the applicants have also spoken with Dan Schumann at the county, and we are under the impression that the county might actually be putting in another concept proposal for that project, in which case it likely would be, the project itself, I believe, would be a viable project. It just needs an eligible applicant.
Okay, so you haven't heard again, and that's where I kind of understood it was left off, because I know it was the kind of a gateway project to the Freeport community and the northern, access to the Delta on the Sacramento County side. So, okay, but you haven't heard any more from our folks then, as far as the
the last thing we heard, excuse me, the last thing we heard was that the county planning department was going to bring something to the board of supervisors.
Okay.
But I don't want to speak for them, so I can't say for sure.
I didn't know. I haven't had a briefing from folks, internal to us. I know the folks on the Freeport, town, committee certainly been very interested, and I know been active and met with me. But okay, I'll follow up with our folks. I hadn't heard from them, and I appreciate the update. So thanks, man. Thanks, Bob.
All right. Do we have any other questions?
Karen, I'd just like very quickly to reiterate, I mean, we've advocated strongly in various corners that $12 million for these type of projects in the Delta is just not anywhere near sufficient. And, unfortunately, bond discussions are not on the table, but we're going to re-energize our outreach. Robin has done a great job of outreach, but given where we are, we're going to kind of step that up. But I do think it really is important for everyone on the board and on the call just to recognize that there's money on the table here and we can put it to really good projects. But we want to help encourage people know that it's there and reach out to us if they think they have something that's eligible. So,
thank you, Campbell. Are there any other questions or comments by board members? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on this item?
I don't see any hands currently raised.
All right. Then we will now move on to item 8, which is the Nutria Eradication Program update by Valerie, but Campbell wanted to make a brief comment.
Yeah, I just want to welcome Valerie and thank Valerie for being here. As you all know, the Conservancy has 2 Prop 1 grants to support this program, and that's really recognizing the significant impact that Nutria could have in the Delta on levees and habitat. Due to Valerie and her team's great work, we have not had but 1 sighting in the Delta long ago. But Valerie's done a fantastic job, and she's going to give you just a general overview of the program and how it's functioning and answer any questions you've got. So again, thanks, Valerie. And I think James is going to tee up your slideshow and he'll run that for you.
Okay, thanks, Campbell. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and provide you guys with updates. Nice to see you all again. You're all so much smaller than I remember now. Okay, let's see here. James, do I have control of the PowerPoint to progress slides, or are you flipping for me?
I can flip for you if you'd
Okay.
like. Yep.
Okay, so as Campbell mentioned, today I'm just going to give you a brief update on our overall nutria eradication efforts. I want to discuss a few specific grant-related components of interest and also discuss a few items that are on the horizon. Next slide. So before I dive in, I do want to just provide a quick refresher on the timeline of this effort. So again, nutria were first discovered in the state in March of 2017. March of 2018, the department instituted the incident command system, effectively temporarily redirecting staff for an emergency response. January of 2019, the first, what we call phase 1 grant was executed. That provided funding for a couple of department staff, as well as funding for us to contract with external staff and a small amount of funding for detector dog work. In July of 2019, we received positions and a relatively small amount of funding through the state budget, and that allowed us to begin a transition out of that redirected emergency response with borrowed staff to a formal dedicated program that was committed to this effort for the long term. In April of 2020, we determined that we could operate most effectively with the entire project team under the department's program. So at that point, we concluded our work with external contract staff. And then in June of 2020, we've now executed the phase 2 grant, which provides vastly expanded funding for department staff, trucks for those staff. It supports our Judas Nutria project, and then also provides the funding for us to develop and implement a scat detector dog program. Next slide. So to summarize the progress that we have made to date, we have now assessed over 1 million acres for habitat suitability and or nutria presence. We've been able to execute entry permits with over 3,500 landowners. We've deployed almost 3,000 camera stations for almost 20,000 different deployment intervals throughout the project area. And we cover the landscape at a 40-acre grid. And of that grid, we have confirmed nutria presence in over 400 of those 40-acre cells. We've deployed over 4,000 different trap sets or almost 54,000 trap nights. So for clarity, a trap night is, if one trap is deployed for one night, that is one trap night. If we have 2 traps deployed for 5 nights, that's 10 trap nights. Of those total trap nights, we have now taken, and updated for today, we've now taken 1,904 animals from the state. So still the majority of those in Merced County. The updated number, those additional 3 came from Stanislaus County. So we're now at 549 animals taken from Stanislaus County, 103 from San Joaquin County, 12 from Mariposa, 2 from Fresno, and then we've confirmed the presence of an animal in Tuolumne County close to 4 years ago, but no animals have been detected or taken in that county since. We have taken over 1,000 of those animals in 2020 alone, so we have more than doubled the number taken so far in this year as the total number that had been taken in almost the 3 preceding years. And I want to point out that while some of this is an artifact of the reproduction that had been occurring on the landscape over the last couple of years or so, this is largely a reflection of the increased staffing levels that these Prop 1 grants have provided to us. So we've been able to roughly triple the size of our field crew, and that has done a lot in terms of our ability to increase the coverage on the landscape and the intensity with which we're able to address what we're finding there. Next slide. So this is a map showing the locations of where those nutria have been taken or otherwise detected. So the small orange dots that you see represent a 40-acre cell where nutria have been detected, but no animals were taken. And the red circles that you see represent a 40-acre cell where nutria have been taken, and the size is proportional to the total number of animals taken in that cell. So you can see that in terms of the distribution of where those animals are being taken from, we're still looking at the same watersheds. We've not had any major expansions. There are no new or notable locations where we've popped up and detected or taken these animals. Over the last year, of those roughly 1,000 animals we've taken over the last year, those have been roughly equally split between the grasslands of Merced County, so the large contiguous area of managed wetlands, and Stanislaus County in just a few locations along the San Joaquin River corridor. So we've seen a lot of take in Stanislaus County over this last year. As for the Delta itself, we have not had any additional detections anywhere further out in the Delta beyond the Rough and Ready Island detection from May of last year. Walthall Slough, we hit very hard last year and into the winter of this year. We have only had a few detections in Walthall this year. That whole area is inundated with camera coverage. We've had a few detections pop up. A couple in June and then one earlier this month. And then we ended up taking one female from that slough a couple of weeks ago. She was not pregnant. She had not recently had a litter, but we know that those animals are coming from somewhere in the vicinity. We suspect upstream towards the Stanislaus County side of things. Let's see, so next slide. This is another map that just shows the work areas that we have been prioritizing over the last year. The spring and summer of this year, we were prioritizing the work areas that you see highlighted in teal. Those red X's on the map represent the locations where nutria have been taken during the life of the project. So in the spring and summer of this year, we were focusing on the South Delta, that San Joaquin River corridor, and very, very heavily focused on the grasslands in Merced County, which is has always been really ground zero for us. Next slide. We've now made our seasonal transition out of the grasslands and expanded further out into the Delta, into the Merced, Stanislaus, and Tuolumne River corridors. We have a few additional positions to fill, and as those staff are brought on board, we'll be expanding further out into the Delta and also up the San Joaquin River corridor into Fresno County, where we know we've got at least a small population to deal with. And then as our Judas Nutria project gets off the ground, the Delta is going to be a very major focus for us with implementing that project. Next slide. So I do want to talk a little bit about the Judas Nutria project and what we're experiencing here. The Judas project is going to be increasingly valuable to us as this effort progresses, because as we remove more and more of these animals, the better we do our job, the harder our job is going to get, and the more difficult these animals are going to be to find. So we're working on expanding our toolbox and refining that toolbox so that we can be most effective and efficient when the time comes. So as a reminder, Judas Nutria are, it's the biblical term where we put these animals to work for us. They're working in our favor, betraying their buddies on the landscape. So these are satellite telemetry collared animals that have been sterilized. so they cannot reproduce. But we take advantage of their social behavior. That makes them a really valuable tool. They want to seek out other nutria. So we can put them to work in our favor and have them search the landscape for us to find populations we've not previously detected, and also to help us find any remaining animals or migrating animals that come back into an area after we have trapped and believe that we've removed them all. So for example, Wallfall Slough, these animals are going to be a very valuable tool in that area so that we can determine where these random animals keep coming from. We received our initial batch of collars to start testing in this summer, May and June of this summer. We were able to deploy those collars on a few animals to conduct our initial evaluations. We're still in the trial and error phase, but ultimately what we found of that initial prototype was pretty poor collar performance. This is a fairly novel type of collar in that it's a iridium satellite collar, which delivers the data to us remotely. We don't have to be out in the field within a couple 100 meters of an animal to determine where they are, because that's not realistic in this effort. And when you're dealing with an animal that can disperse, dozens of miles away from where you release them. So these collars performed more poorly than we expected that they would, but we did anticipate a trial and error phase where we've got to go back to the drawing board and refine the tool in order to meet our objectives. What we did not anticipate, though, was the very low survival rate in the nutria that we're working with. We found a lot of health issues in these animals, including emphysema, pneumonia, bacterial infections of the lungs, chronic heart lesions. And of the surgeries that we did, we were only able to successfully release 4 of those animals. And of those 4, they only survived 1 to 2 weeks. So we in general, we were back to the drawing board from all sides. We've developed a new collar prototype with our collar manufacturer, and that's what you see on the photo on the bottom right. That's actually the new collar prototype that was being tested over the last month. So it's a very beautiful little pearl necklace. It's quite stylish. So that collar actually has performed really, really well. It's been able to collect accurate GPS fixes on schedule and reliably transmit that data to us every day. So we're very, very pleased with that new, the new collar prototype. We are still working out really the fit of that collar to make sure that we can successfully deploy these over longer periods of time. And then on the other side of things, we're doing a stepwise analysis of the stressors that these animals are exposed to through this surgical process. So the capture, the transport, the drugs, the surgery, the housing. We're trying to figure out what we can streamline and eliminate or modify to help ensure that these animals remain alive and that they can be deployed reliably in the field to do the job that we need them to. So our next several releases will be just continued trial and error to try to determine how to get this project off the ground most successfully. And then ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, Wallfall Slough will be a high priority area for us to get these animals deployed in to help us make sure that that site is cleared and stays cleared and doesn't wind up being a feeder for the Delta. Next slide. I apologize for the pink hue of this video, but I've got a video I'd like to share that's just a few seconds long. This is the Judas nutria that we deployed last month testing that new collar prototype. If you can hit next slide, this should play. So this is one of our camera stations with our attractant platforms that he's a big fan of sweet potatoes, so we caught him in front of the camera grooming and spending some time there. Okay, next slide. Okay, the other major component that I want to talk about here is the detector dog work. We have funding in both of our grants for this effort, and I want to focus on this a little bit because this is the area that is seemingly most impacted by COVID and experiencing some delays that may be a continued conversation in the future. So the first grant provides funding for us to really evaluate the tool in California. So we had site visits scheduled this past year to bring out the Chesapeake Bay Nutria Eradication Project's dog teams and USDA's Nutria Dog Trainer to help us evaluate the efficacy of this tool in California and how it can be effectively applied in California's environments and our shifting water conditions. The environmental conditions and habitats here are quite different from where this tool is applied on the East Coast. And we all want to make sure that we're in agreement about how this tool can be applied in California. We want to make sure it's effective before everyone commits to developing a formal program to utilize this tool. So the first grant provides funding for that initial evaluation and those initial field trials. Those visits were scheduled for this past year, but they were delayed due to COVID travel restrictions. We've tentatively rescheduled those for beginning in spring of 2021, but again, due to COVID, we are all sort of at the mercy of what agencies can allow and what staff can safely do. So, you know, as you voted on today, the term extension of that first grant will allow us some greater flexibility, but at this point, there are no guarantees for a timeline there. So this is something that we'll be watching closely as we move forward. And then the second grant provides funding for actual development and implementation of the formal dog program. And that is contingent upon the results of the field trials and that initial evaluation, which again is delayed due to COVID. That funding is tied to our phase 2 grant, which expires in June of 2023. So, you know, we're watching what our timeline looks like for ability to evaluate that tool and stand up the program. And you know, I just want to put this on your radar that as we progress and we have to see how COVID plays out, that we'll be watching for delays that may ultimately impact or conflict with the timeline of that phase 2 grant. And next slide. So lastly, I just want to summarize and talk about next steps in the effort. We will continue to expand our efforts, both in terms of staff and the Judas Nutria Project, and ideally with the Detector Dog program. But, you know, over the next year, we're going to get the greatest insight into our program efficacy and how things are going for us. We've been able to expand our efforts to the level we believe is necessary to be successful. But next year, once we are able to return to the grasslands and some of these other areas that we have previously trapped, and we believe we have cleared the populations or the vast majority of the populations from these areas, when we return there next year, what we find is going to be most telling about how effective we are doing our jobs and how effective our methodology is. And how well we can stay in front of any reproduction and population recovery during those intervals of time. So the next year is going to be very telling for us. I won't touch too much on the next bullet point, the current request for modification that you voted on earlier today. I will just say thank you for your support and flexibility. And I just want to reiterate, you know, that we are it's always on our radar, that potential need for modification in the future relative to the dog program and having to see how COVID impacts our timelines there. And lastly, I just want to sum up with a couple of notes about a piece of federal legislation that recently went through. HR 3399 was passed by both the House and the Senate. It's with the president for signing now. That's a reauthorization of the Nutria Eradication and Control Act that would make funding available to any state that needs funding to control or eradicate nutria for 5 fiscal years. So that would run through fiscal year 25-26. It's no secret that the vast majority of this operations funding comes from grants and primarily from Prop 1 grants. Our last grant expires during fiscal year 22-23. And so it's on our radar that we have to come up with supplemental funding at that time to ensure that this operation continues at the level necessary to ensure success. And so I just want to note that we've got one more opportunity on the horizon to help support us and our success over the long term. Excuse me, over the long term. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that we have time for.
Are there any questions from board or members? Go ahead, Leo.
Just a comment. I think that was a great presentation. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. You did answer one question I had, and that was, has there been any population modeling done? And if so, what are estimated impacts on the population of the animal? I guess you'll be getting into that next year when you go to Modesto and visit the valley. The question I do have is, on your map, you have confirmed and reported, and on the, detected and on the map. What does detection mean? Is that a confirmed detection? Is that caught by a camera, or is it a phone call into the office by somebody who may think they have seen one?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so those are confirmed detections. Those are guaranteed. And typically what those represent is we may have found a road-killed animal. We may have received a picture that we can confirm that this 100%, this is a nutria in this location, but we've not, we've not gone out and actively trapped that area, or we've gone out and we've not found anything. So it just represents the fact that we are 100% confident that a nutria was there at some point in time, but that we have not actively trapped and removed animals from that location yet.
Okay, thank you.
And then I'll add one other piece of information quickly. The Department of Water Resources has funded a population genetics analysis to be done by our genetics lab that essentially they will be analyzing genetic samples from animals taken in all of these different little pocket populations across the project area. They're looking at the entire genetic diversity of the population and then looking at what proportion of the genetics we're removing from the population. And that's essentially a proxy for what proportion of that population are we taking with our current methods. And so it's not a direct modeling of the population, but it's, essentially that's how it functions. So that work will occur over the next year. We're working on getting that position filled now, and that's going to be pretty telling for us as well.
Great.
Any other, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Anybody on the phone? Okay, do we have any public comment on this item?
I don't see any hands raised currently.
All right, then let's move on to item 9, which is the Program and Policy Committee update from Campbell.
Great, thank you. And thanks again, Valerie. We really appreciate you being here and providing that overview. Okay, so the Program and Policy Subcommittee met on September 16th, and there were 3 agenda items. One was a discussion of the Conservancy's role in holding easements in the future, and then standard updates for Proposition 1 and Prop 68, very much like you received today. So I'm just going to summarize the easement discussion for you right now. It's a very interesting discussion. So the first thing we started with was just an overview of what the Conservancy's authorities are. Our enabling legislation authorizes us to hold title to land, to be a landowner. It also authorizes us to hold easements for land. It states a preference that we would try to achieve our objectives through easements as opposed to holding title. but it also authorizes us to receive funding. And lastly, it authorizes us to create and manage endowments for the purposes of land ownership and land management. We also talked about the sort of emerging need for the Conservancy potentially to hold easements. Both the Department of Water Resources and Department of Fish and Wildlife currently have need for easement holders for both mitigation land associated with levee maintenance, as well as some of the restoration work that has been being done. Typically in the past, they've been running requests for proposals for people to hold easements and manage the land. And that is, it's a cumbersome process. So they're thinking a state-to-state relationship might speed that process, but they're also getting relatively limited response. And we reached out to a couple of, or one of the entities that does this type of work and learned quite a bit about their interest in moving forward and continue to serve these purposes and what their limitations are. So overall, I would say that there is, we've kind of identified a potential need, and we're exploring how and if the Conservancy should really try to meet that need. We talked about what we had learned through our exploration with other conservancies that actively hold easements, about what it actually takes to effectively manage and hold and manage easements. And there really are three components. There are four components, excuse me. There is the actually legally holding the easement, being responsible for the easement. There's the land management. Easements typically require some level of land management that must be completed. There's the monitoring and reporting requirements that demonstrate that all the terms and conditions of the easement are actually being met in perpetuity. And then there is the management of the endowment, which is where the project puts sufficient funding to ensure that throughout time, indefinitely, there's enough resource to actually do all the aforementioned efforts of land management and monitoring. So there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to doing easements well and doing them effectively and efficiently. And so it was a good discussion. We described all the elements and what's out there and what we understand. And actually, Vice Chair Winternitz made the suggestion at that point that we look for a project, one or two projects in the Delta that will require the use of an easement, and see if we can't sort of piggyback on those projects as a real world learning platform with no commitment that we would be the one to actually hold the easement in the end, but see if we can't just use them to identify all the steps and processes as a way to inform ourselves and the board about what it would look like and how the role we might play, and bring it to a decision point at some point in the future. So we have reached out to DWR as well as Westerfeld, and DWR has identified two projects on Twitchell Island, and they're very happy to have us sort of in parallel explore all the elements of the development of those easements, the management plan, the monitoring plan, and the endowment process as a way to just learn and really bring us to a decision point. We still have quite a bit to learn about what it means to actually create and manage an endowment. For the most part, our sister agencies use the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to do that for them. And I've reached out to them and learned quite a bit about that process. But we're also trying to just better understand what our role could be in actually physically holding or creating and managing endowments too. So there'll be more information there as well. So in summary, I would just say that this is an interesting exploration. I think it's one of the reasons that the Conservancy was created. I think there is a need out there for us to potentially do this. There's a lot to understand, because I think if we take it on, we want to make sure that we've got sufficient resources and we know how to do it and how to do it well. But what I envision is we'll continue to sort of go through this exploration and bring more information to the board, probably on the next 8 to 12 months, and sort of steer towards a decision point with ongoing input at the Program Policy Subcommittee level, as well as updates to the board at regular board meetings. So I think at that, I'll stop and see if anybody has any thoughts or questions.
This is Larry.
Go ahead, Larry.
As some of you know, I'm on the board of the California Farmland Trust. We've spent the last couple years mulling over the exact same issues that you have. We are an agricultural holder of easements, so it's a little different than conservation. But the 4 points you mentioned are exactly what we've been, actually, we've had a long-term sustainability study done. Campbell, you might want to reach out to Charlotte Mitchell at the California Farmland Trust, just to kind of maybe just bounce some of your questions, or, just maybe she can share some of the knowledge we've learned over those years.
That's a great idea, and we'll definitely do that. I've worked quite a bit with Charlotte in the past, and look forward to chatting with her. Thanks, Larry.
You bet.
Anyone else?
Sandy?
How come I'm not seeing Sandy? She's right there. Go ahead, Sandy.
Thanks. Is there a particular, it sounds to me like you're kind of focusing on easements. So I guess one, let me check that. Is that correct, that that for some reason there's an emphasis on the easement piece, or is it sort of like an incremental step in the process of understanding through fee ownership?
So throughout our history, we've explored the potential for fee ownership as well. And we've done a bit of a circular on that. Our first thought was, if to the extent that there may be a project out there that everyone agrees the Conservancy is the right person to hold title to that land, we would use that as a point to really explore how do we ensure that we can take on ownership and do it effectively. We then, at the conclusion of our last update of our strategic plan, decided let's take a little more methodical approach and really try to look at what would it take for us to quantify and identify the resources that we would need to actually hold title to land and take on that role. Through that discussion, we kind of looped back to what we really need is an actual project to really drive, because every project is so different. The specifics are so different. So we've kind of come back to a holding pattern. If in the future there is a piece of property that somebody has an interest or would like us to entertain ownership of, we would use that as a way to really explore that role. And throughout a 10-year period, that just hasn't happened. So then several months ago, DWR and DFW in the DELHAC meeting, the Delta Habitat and Levee Advisory Committee meeting, were talking about the need for easement holders and that they were concerned that there weren't enough. And that was our first understanding that this was a role that that needs to be filled out there in the Delta. So that's what got us to sort of shift into more of a focus on the easements.
Okay, any other questions? Any hands raised? Okay, is there any public comment?
I don't see any hands raised currently.
All righty, then let us go to the next item, which is item number 9, the Program and Policy Subcommittee update.
That's actually what we just finished.
I'm sorry, I know we did Nutria and I'm following this, but okay, number 10, Delta Stewardship Council update. Amanda?
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Chair Mitchoff, and good morning, Conservancy board members. I appreciate the opportunity to update you on the council's activities. We've had a busy month between the Science Action Agenda Management Questions Workshop, which you've heard about previously from my colleague Eva Bush. We also, this past month, held a Science Needs Assessment Workshop. We had a Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee meeting on Monday, and then we also had our monthly council meeting last week. So probably of greatest interest to the Conservancy, however, was one of the panel discussions that we had at the DPIC meeting on Monday, which focused on climate resilience. As California continues to experience climate change through hotter temperatures, more severe wildfires, and prolonged droughts, regional adaptation rooted in science is more critical than ever. And so during Monday's DPIC meeting, we explored the current context for regional adaptation planning and implementation through projects initiated by the Stewardship Council, as well as the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission. We then discussed what future collaborative regional adaptation across the interconnected Bay Delta system might look like, as well as the current administration's priorities and strategic direction for climate change and opportunities for DPIC members to collaborate on climate resilience efforts in the Bay Delta region. And as many of you probably know, Governor Newsom recently signed the Nature-Based Solutions Executive Order to boost near-term climate resilience efforts by, among other things, setting a goal for the state to conserve at least 30% of California's land and coastal waters by 2030. The executive order directs state agencies to develop and report strategies to the governor no later than February 1st, 2022 to achieve this goal. And while there is important work yet to be done to implement the executive order and to achieve this 30 by 30 objective, both Delta Adapts, which is the Conservancy's adaptation or vulnerability assessment and adaptation strategy, and then Bay Adapt, which is BCDC's related effort, both have the potential to meaningfully contribute to the executive order's goals, as does the Conservancy's carbon sequestration efforts. Bay Adapt and Delta Adapts are really, good examples of how regional partners are working together to advance climate solutions. And both the Conservancy and BCDC are working closely on these two efforts to really try and gain and kind of leverage what each in the other is learning about what's going to be happening in the Bay and the Delta. I'll just give you a little bit of information about Delta Adapts, which again is the Conservancy-led process, and then I can let you know who to contact for more details on Delta Adapts. So Delta Adapts is a two-part initiative focused primarily on exposure to flooding, and it quantitatively addresses and models climate stressors related to sea level rise, changes in precipitation, and then changes in air temperature. So part one of Delta Adapts is a vulnerability assessment, and part two is an adaptation strategy. And the council is just completing the first phase of vulnerability assessment. And we will be beginning sometime early next year, the adaptation strategy portion of it. We do have some initial findings from the assessment. I am absolutely not the best person to ask about what some of those initial findings are, but if you are interested, I can definitely put you in contact with the right people at our agency who are very knowledgeable about this, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions and even potentially come in and present to the Conservancy Board at a future meeting. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or let you know.
If I could just interject very quickly. Yeah. Amanda, you mentioned a couple of times that the Delta Adapts is a Conservancy-led effort.
Oh, sorry, Council.
It is, yeah, Council-led effort. Just want to make sure that was clear. But we're very excited to see the results from the vulnerability assessment, and then also very excited to be involved in the adaptation strategy development moving forward. So we will be working closely with the Stewardship Council on that.
Great, thank you.
You're muted, Karen.
I'm sorry. Are there any members of the board who wish to have any questions for Amanda? I'm not seeing any. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak?
No hands raised currently.
Wonderful. Meaning, thank you for that information. Moving on to item 11, which is the Delta Protection update from Eric Vink. Is Eric with us today?
I don't see him. Are you there, Eric? He had reached out to me and indicated that he may be late. He also indicated that if he wasn't able to update us, it wouldn't be tragic because he doesn't have a huge update. So let's move on, and if he shows up before the end of the meeting, we'll bring him in.
All right, then number 12, Delta Conveyance update from Carrie Buckman.
Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi. So a lot of updates, but mostly we're just working away on all of the different elements of the project. So starting with CEQA NEPA updates. On the CEQA side, we're continuing to work on documenting existing conditions, determining assessment methods for different resources, and refining models that we're planning to use to assess resources. So sort of working on the meat of the document. On the NEPA side, the Army Corps issued a notice of intent to prepare an environmental impact statement in August. They were accepting scoping comments through October 20th last week, so they're currently processing those comments. I think we discussed during a prior meeting, but just as a quick update on that, we do expect that the environmental impact statement from the Corps will be a separate document from the environmental impact report that we are developing at DWR, but we are working to keep the schedules aligned so that the review periods would be at or close to the same time so that people can review those documents together. We're also working on some soil investigations in the Delta to learn more about the soil conditions. So earlier this year, we completed an initial study in mitigated negative declaration, and we're now working on some investigations on public property and some on private property where we have permission to enter that land. We're also working to reach out to landowners to try to obtain additional entry permissions through temporary entry permits that have rules of how we would use that property, how long we would be there, the conditions that we would leave the property, types of rules that we would follow while we're out there. So we're working on negotiating those with additional landowners for permissions to enter their property. And the last thing I wanted to talk about today is that we're talking a lot internally about the community benefits program that we'd like to incorporate as part of the project. So the community benefits program is a detailed set of commitments that would be made by the project proponents and created in coordination with the local communities. It would be separate from and in addition to the permit conditions and environmental mitigation that we're including as part of the CEQA, NEPA, and the other permitting processes. So we're working now to set up a process where we'd like to involve stakeholders, community leaders, interested agencies in developing the framework and eventually the program itself. So it's very important to us that the community benefits program is developed in coordination with the communities that it would be benefiting. So we're really focused a lot on process on this. So we're also working to try to get some preliminary feedback on our thoughts from key groups, including the Delta Stewardship Council, Delta Protection Commission, and we'd like to talk to Conservancy staff on this as well. And then we'll start talking about it in a more public forum in December through the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority's Stakeholder Engagement Committee. So I think those are my updates. I'm happy to take any questions.
I have a question, and that is, you said you're working with a number of property owners to get permission. How many total property owners and how many are you current? In other words, how many have you gotten permission from and how many are still in the works?
So I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but I can certainly get them and follow up with you.
Yes, and for future, that would be something that I think our members would like to know.
Okay.
Any other? Thank you. Any other board members who have any questions? Seeing none, do we have any public comment?
No hands raised.
No hands raised. Okay, let's go on to item 13, which is the Eco Restore update from Charlotte Biggs.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to pull up my notes. So I'm Charlotte Biggs. I'm a program manager with the Department of Water Resources. And for those that are listening in today and maybe aren't as familiar with the Eco Restore Initiative, it's a multi-agency initiative focused on restoring about 30,000 acres within the Delta, Sassoon Marsh, and Yolo bypass. DWR is the lead agency on the majority of these projects. We have about 30 projects in the portfolio right now. And the projects are being done for many different reasons. They're tidal wetlands, floodplain creation and enhancement, fish passage improvements. Some are mitigation, some are enhancement. So it's really an umbrella program. And we kind of try to provide a one-stop shop for information. Our program includes a lot of collaboration with different partners, including the Delta Conservancy. And so today I was just going to give a really kind of quick update on some of the progress that we've made this year in 2020. But I was going to prepare for your next meeting because it'll be the end of the year and construction work windows will end. Maybe some slides to show some pictures of these efforts to give you a real feel for the projects that have been under construction this year. So this year in 2020, we've had 4 projects under construction that started construction this year, which is really exciting considering this has been a challenging year. So we've been able to still move forward and make progress on the ground. And of those 4 projects, 2 will actually be completed this year. So I'm just going to walk through really quick those 4 projects and just let me know if you have any updates. And again, I'll probably prepare a more robust update for your next meeting. So the first project is on Sherman Island. It's Whale's Belly, which is a managed wetland project being done to capture carbon and help offset subsidence in the Delta. And so this is a demonstration project associated with the Delta Carbon Program, and we're partnering with the Conservancy on this effort. So we're excited that this effort was able to break ground this May, and it's continuing under construction now. Our work window will be ending soon, and the project will continue construction next year. And we're hoping to complete that project about this time next year. The second project I wanted to highlight is the Lower Elkhorn Basin Levee Setback Project, which is a multi-benefit flood improvement and habitat restoration project adjacent to the Sacramento Weir. This is a partnership within the department, Reclamation District 537 and SAFEGA to build a setback levee, and it will also create space for about 900 acres of habitat, floodplain, and other types of habitat restoration. So this project is currently under construction this year, and work will continue next year. Third, I wanted to highlight Lower Yolo Ranch, which is a project at the stair step in the Southern Yolo Bypass. And this is a tidal wetland restoration project that's being done to provide mitigation credit for ongoing state water project operations. This project's been in the works for a long time. I think we mentioned CalFed earlier today. This has been in the works for a long time. So we're really excited that it is under construction this year, and it's actually going to be completed in the next few days. So very exciting news. And the site is owned by Westlands Water District. The site will be transferred to DWR once the project is completed and habitat credits have been obtained. And DWR will take on the long-term management of the site as part of the fish restoration program and our partnership with DFW. And then lastly, project number 4 is Wings Landing. And it's a tidal restoration project in the Sassoon Marsh. It's being done for mitigation for state water project long-term operations, but it's also helping us achieve our restoration goals under the Sassoon Marsh Preservation Plan and Management Plan. And so this project's also done by the Department of Water Resources Fish Restoration Program. And they are partnering with the private sector, Natural Resources Group, to get this project done. And it is done, actually. So it broke ground in September, and it's already completed. And so we're excited we've got some drone footage and some photos that we'll be able to share and put some of this information out. Right now, things are a little crazy with everything moving around, but yeah, we are excited to have this progress to share this year. And just let me know if you have any questions about that. And at your next meeting, I'll also update you on any planning work that's been done this year, as those will come to completion as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Are there any questions of Charlotte or comments? Leo,
Sure. Don Natoli.
Okay, Leo, yeah, Don's on the phone, so I'm going to let Don go ahead.
Yeah, just real quickly, Charlotte, this is Don Natoli. I'd like to schedule a time, if it's appropriate, to visit the restoration site on Sherman Island. I know we talked about it, I think, last spring or maybe late last winter, and I know we've done some road work out there to we had some necessary road repairs on Sherman Island Crossroad, and I've been out there recently just in that area, but I'd like to get a chance to maybe meet with somebody on the site that can explain the whole effort and coordinate with you. So I don't know if you want me to call your office or you can call my office. I know I got your card last spring, but I would very much like to become more familiar with the details of what's planned out there.
Yeah, that's great, Don. Yeah, I think we had talked about that, and then coronavirus happened, so I definitely would want to follow up with you. But we would definitely can put that together, so I can follow up with you on that, and I'll look forward to getting you out there.
Okay,
we'd be happy to participate in that as well. I think it'd be a great opportunity, obviously, provided that we can be very careful and appropriately spaced and all that.
Well, there's plenty of wide open space out there, so I'm sure we can get 6 feet apart. So, okay, good. That'd be great, Campbell. Okay, thanks,
Yeah,
Karen.
absolutely. Okay, I'll follow up with you, Campbell, and maybe we can coordinate.
Okay, thank you, Don. Leo?
That was part of my comment. Hi, Charlotte. I definitely want to get out there. I want to see what some of these projects are. Means Landing, Lower Elkhorn, Lower Yolo Ranch, they've been around for a long time. If they're breaking ground, if they're nearly completed, it's good to see them before I die. If you can get some video that you can show the board, that'd be great. Or if we can get a tour out there for at least 1 or 2 of them, that would be great as well.
Absolutely. How about I follow up with Campbell on some other efforts as well? Probably Lower Yolo Ranch, and it's connected to Yolo Flyaway Farms. We have so much going on in that area. So I'm sure we can coordinate that and maybe just drive separately. That's what we've been doing, and just keeping site visits very small. But I think we can make that happen.
That's great.
Great.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments from board members? Do we have any public comment on this?
No hands are raised, but I have seen that Director Vink has joined the meeting.
Oh, hi, Eric. Did you want to give an update on the Delta Protection Commission? But you may be muted.
Actually, it looks like he may have dropped off again. He was here for short time.
He was. He might have noticed that we were past him on the agenda and thought his opportunity had been missed. So.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on now to our last item. Well, our next to last item. We've got public comment both before and after on this meeting.
We always have one last opportunity for public
All
comment.
right, okay. Campbell, go ahead and talk about any potential agenda items.
So we just had two, and the first was that there may be Proposition 68 projects in January. I think per Robin's update, we're pretty certain that's unlikely. March is likely the soonest any of those would come. But then we also just included on there that we do hope to have some virtual tours of some of our projects at the January meeting. So it's your opportunity. Anything you've heard today or anything that's you would definitely like to see in terms of an update, if you let us know now or anytime between now and January 27th. Please note too that our next board meeting will be January 27th. Happy to take any suggestions.
Anybody want anything else on next time's agenda? Seeing none, did we get Eric back? No. Okay, I'll open it up again for any comment on any item not on today's agenda. Do we have any additional or anyone who wishes to address us on public comment?
Just a reminder for people that do want to make public comment, there is the raise your hand feature in Zoom to raise your hand. You can also, if you dialed in, press #2 to raise your hand and make comment.
And I take it you're not seeing any?
Nobody's raised their hand. Nope.
Okay, well, that means staff is doing a fabulous job. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank staff. I know how difficult it is during these very challenging times, and your work product and the quality of your work is just exceptional. And so on behalf of the board, I just want to thank you all for the hard work you're doing, and wish everyone happy holidays. I can't believe it. It's October 28th, but we won't be meeting until the new year. Let us pray and hope that 2021 starts out and continues with, as Campbell mentioned earlier, a vaccine. And we are able, probably not at the January meeting, but I'll look forward to seeing you all in person. I still may have long hair, maybe cut off. Who knows by then what my whims will be. And with that, have a wonderful day, everyone. I miss you all. I know the board misses everybody. And again, thank you again for all of your exceptional work. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.